When you get to, you're in, you've gone through the selection, the training, you're a part of this new special operations unit, the fight is on. How long from when you get assigned to where you're going within that unit did it take for you to actually deploy for the first time?
Let's see. I got assigned to my team, and make sure I get the year wrong. We'll call it June or July, 2003, and then went on our first deployment August or September.
So the war in Iraq at this point is well underway.
Yes. Yeah, there were some guys in my class that graduated that immediately deployed, after they finished up and want to join their units.
Before you step on the plane to go to Iraq, did you have any kind of, conversations with your wife, with family members saying, hey, I'm going to war. I don't really, know what to expect, but I'm going to war. What was that like, knowing that I'm walking out this door and I'm not going to be back for a significant amount of time? Best case scenario, worst case scenario, I'm maybe not coming back at all.
Yeah, I think in the beginning it was all novel and new. It was something that I thought about for many years when I was a 175. And the off chance at that time it would actually be to war, but it was, I put a little bit of thought into it, but also try to compartmentalize, just because of the sheer weight of actually having to think about that. So I didn't have a whole lot to say. Obviously, I'd always tell my wife goodbye, or we'll see you again when I was our thing, and we'll decide where, flip that switch and make it happen.
When you talk about flipping that switch and making it happen, what was your expectation for what combat was going to be like compared to what the reality was once you finally got a taste of it for the first time? Was your perception that it turned out to be pretty accurate, or was combat something that was totally different than what you thought it would be?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I really had to base it off of at the time was everything I'd seen in the week, you know what I mean? But with our training leading up to that, we try to make it as realistic as possible. So the expectation versus what actually happened was pretty close. Obviously, much different in person, but the training and everything that I've done to prepare myself, we had all prepared ourselves going into it. It was pretty close to it.
And had most of the guys that were on the specific subsection of the unit that you're in, your specific team, had many of those guys been to combat before, or was this kind of new for everyone?
Well, they had all been. They had gone on, the initial invasion and everything. So we're talking about guys that already been seasoned combat veterans.
Gotcha. Perfect. So you're really, not only are you the new guy, you're the only guy who's not been in this situation before. Did you feel a lot of pressure being in those shoes that I really need to perform?
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, my very first taste of combat was at the Special Mission Unit. So there was a lot of stress, some anxiety, and I knew I needed to perform. I knew I needed to keep up, listen to everyone, and learn.
One of the things that I'm always curious about, and I know the viewers are curious about too, is when guys talk about not just being in combat for the first time, but they pulled the trigger for the first time. That threshold's kind of broken of, I look down the optics on this rifle, and when I've squeezed this trigger, I could be taking another human's life. Good guy, bad guy, that's how guns work, right? When you pull that trigger, that bullet ain't coming back. For you personally, was there any doubt in your mind that when the time came in combat, if you had to use deadly force, did you worry that maybe I can't actually kill a bad guy, I can't take another human's life? Or did you know, push comes to shove, I'm going to do my job and it's not going to be an issue whatsoever?
Yeah, that was a thing that I had already thought about and settled in my heart and my mind. The time came, and when the time came to do that, there was no hesitation. Really thinking about that, and a lot of that too was involved in training and just preparing mentally. But for where I was at personally, I could tell a difference between evil, good and evil. And I knew at that point it was my job to, if required, exercise judgment on our people and do it swiftly.
And we're going to, and I'm glad you brought that up, because we're going to get into kind of evil a little bit later in the interview. And I really can't wait to unpackage all of that, because I think you're going to have some interesting thoughts on that point. When you're in an elite unit, is it kind of the situation where if you hesitate, like, you know, you get through the training, you get through the selection, you're in the unit, if a time comes where you hesitate and all of a sudden you get gun shy, you won't pull the trigger? I mean, is it just like you're a good guy, but you can't be here if you're going to get scared like that?
Yeah. There's so much at risk there, right? Not just to your own personal safety, but everybody else on it. So they all have to depend on you to do your job, to do it right. I can't think of a situation where that happened on my team. And yeah, I can't think of a situation, honestly, where a guy got pulled. Listen, you could.
How quickly? Well, let me rewind just a little bit. When you were there in your first deployment, like you said, it's 2003. The war in Iraq is underway. Obviously, the United States military was able to quickly kind of destabilize the Iraqi military, take Baghdad. It was an incredible show of mechanized power and air power. When you get there, how can you kind of paint a scene for the audience? How bad are things on the ground? Is it still a ton of combat? Because it's before the insurgency, but after the initial invasion. So what's kind of the tempo of how things are?
Yeah, so the out tempo was pretty fast, obviously going out on missions. I think the danger wasn't quite there yet. At that point, we're going after the guys from, you know, Saddam's regime and whatnot. So the foreign fighter network hadn't quite made its way into Iraq. IEDs won a thing, you know, in 2003. So it was, I would say, relatively safe. And what we were doing, we really weren't going against a formidable enemy at that point. So it's kind of going out, doing our job. I guess you could say relatively easy for a novel situation.
Did you find that most of the Iraqis did want to fight, or did they have no interest really of facing the United States military? And if you came across some Iraqis who maybe were armed, or you think they're bad guys, and you make contact with them, how often would it be that they're like, we don't want to do this? Like, we have no interest in getting in shootouts with you guys.
Well, I think initially where we were at, we didn't see a lot of that, not a whole lot of resistance. So obviously the way we did business, we wanted to ensure that we had time to react. So kind of stacking like the cards in our favor there. But I would say initially, that first deployment, probably in 2004, there wasn't a lot of resistance, especially from the Iraqis initially.
And so let's talk about kind of the foreign fighter thing, because I think it's going to be a nice segue into kind of how fatigue and trauma, obviously the dynamics of Iraq change. The Saddam regime is completely gone. And like you just talked, now there's foreign fighters, there's foreign fighter networks, IEDs become a big thing, suicide bombings. What did that shift look like for you, where we were fighting the Saddam regime and now we're kind of in a bit of a different ball game?
Yeah, that shift really hit me and probably all of us. Probably in the summer of 2005, we lost a number of guys. A couple of them fighting out west. So that's really when the foreign fighting network had kicked out, and that's where we had really dedicated jihadists, if you will, the terrorists that were willing to die for their cause. And so summer of 2005 was pretty brutal for all of us. We had a very high injury rate where I was at. Yeah, that's really when it all changed for us. We had to take a look at how we're doing business. Yeah, summer of 2005 was pretty good.
So that's fascinating. So you had this brutal summer where you're taking high casualty rates. What does that do to you mentally? Does it drain on your emotions? Does it drain on you mentally when you're looking around and your teammates are getting hurt, your teammates are getting killed? I mean, how does that just pile one after another on top of each other? What do you do in a situation like that?
Yeah, man. I think it did. It started taking a toll. really take a hard look at how you're doing things and your personal life, kind of all the things. But I think for me, it was, more determination. All right, we really need to buckle down here. And I was kind of a sort of a mid-level guy on the team at that point. So just making sure I'm doing my job, and doing it really well. But yeah, it started to change things.
Did it make it more like, let's go again to 2005 when you're talking about having a lot of injuries, guys getting killed. Did it make the war feel more personal? Like this isn't just business. Like my friends are dead, my friends are blown up, and we're dealing with animals at this point. For you, was it like this is now getting personal to me, or was it always just business?
I would say it started getting a little personal. Mostly business, but definitely starting to get personal after summer 2000.
When you talk about how this is kind of again stacking up on each other, there's stress, there's mental, emotional drains that are going on. How much more difficult does it become to compartmentalize everything? You have a wife back home. You've got a family back home, but if you're anything less than an A+ at your job, someone could get killed, you could get killed. What's that like with every passing day, and how big of a struggle is it to keep things in all your ducks in a row?
Yeah, initially I'd say it was pretty easy. The wife and I have been married for about a year and a half, 2 years before we went to Fort Bragg. We didn't have our first child till 2007. So it was easier on me to, kind of rationalize, all right, if I get killed, it's just my wife, she'll move on and she'll have her family. When things really started changing for me is when our first child was born in 2007. And so now I've got a little bit more skin in the game, you know what I mean? And definitely a reason to stick around. Not that, that was an issue, but now I'm fighting for more once I started having kids.
When you have this kid, your first child is obviously a life-changing event for everyone. It's 2007. When you had the next deployment post your first baby being born, did you find it harder or easier to leave? Because you say you got more skin in the game, but we're fighting for more now. So it's almost like a double-edged sword. It's like I have a baby here, but I'm fighting for more. And if I got to fight, I got to be over there. I can't be here.
Yeah. Definitely knew that I had more skin in the game. Kind of one of the things, like talking about my retirement, maybe a little bit later, but one of the things, to put it in context, I kind of grew up without my dad, right? So now that I have a son, I've got all of these things kind of pulling into the back of my mind. Okay, I want to be around for my son. But, my dad wasn't around. And so that played on a lot of my decision making, especially towards the end of my career. But yeah, it made it hard. When he was just an infant, not so bad. But as he kind of grew up, and by the time he was 5 years old, it became really, really difficult because he knew I was going away at that point. He did fine.
Did you ever have conversations with your son, even at a young age, of, your dad is in a dangerous job, he does very dangerous things, and there's a chance that I could get hurt or killed? Were you open with your children about the line of work you were in, or did you try to shield them as much as you could?
Yeah, I tried to shield them as much as I could. Obviously, they knew I was in the Army and I was going to work. And I don't know if we ever had any conversations with him in particular as he was getting older about what I did. He had no idea, what I did for work in the Army. He just knew that I'd get up and go to work. And then sometimes I'd have to go on these long trips.
I can't imagine the stress and the anxiety that could, that could create, seeing your dad walk out a door, not really knowing. And I think the fact that you said, again, you kind of shielded him from it sounds like a logical, smart decision. You don't want to scare the shit out of your kids, right? Did you notice that did you experience any like personal changes in how you interacted with your family, other people, as these combat tours stacked on top of one of another? And, you're going through a lot of traumatic events, you're losing buddies. Did you notice that your personality was changing in any way? Was the way that you spoke with your wife starting to change, the way you spoke with your kids? Or did it not really have any grave impact on your personal family life?
No, it did. And there was a point where I could start noticing some changes, a little bit more irritability, not sleeping well, kind of all the things that come after, many combat tours. Yeah, so there were some changes. I didn't exactly know what was going on at the time, but now looking back, it was a combination of stress, death, some mild traumatic brain injury from absorbing all the concussive blast waves over many years, and so it was changing things.
And one of the things I know that we've gone over when we're talking about this is there was a death that kind of stuck